Members of council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? None. So looking for approval of the council minutes. First one, the council meeting held June the 6th. Looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Verbicki, Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? Carried. Also looking for a mover and seconder in regard to the special closed meeting held June the 6th. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Hammond. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? And carried. And finally, for the special meeting training session held June the 6th as well. Mover and seconder, Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? And carried. Is there any business arising out of those minutes? I see none. Before we move on to the regular session this evening, Ms. Pilon Abs has an introduction to make to council and the general audience.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, I'd like to introduce to you tonight Mr. Gary Smith. He's our new planner who will be focusing in on development. I'll have him stand real quickly. Gary brings many years of experience, broad range of experience from East Coast to West Coast. He's back here in Ontario after being away for quite a few years. His duties will include all planning aspects that are involved with development. So site plan control, committee of adjustment, zoning bylaw amendments. So he'll be our go-to person with respect to any future applications that are development specific. So I'd like to welcome Gary this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So on behalf of council, Gary, welcome. Get to work. And there's lots of it, so that's good. Okay, so then we'll move right into public meetings and Court of Revision. We do have a public meeting this evening in regard to, let me call it up here, zoning bylaw amendment. Consent application, zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA 128 for 2428 Mercy Road, and Danielle is taking us through this. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, members of council. As noted, this is the public meeting for the combined consent and zoning amendment application for the property located at 2428 Mercia Road 7. So that is on the Leamington side, just north of Wheatley. The subject farm is just over 33 acres in area. It has one single detached dwelling, 2 sheds, and an active gas well on that site. The site is highlighted in black on the screen. This property is designated agricultural in the OP, and it is zoned A2 under the zoning bylaw. So what the owner of the property is looking to do, they're looking to sever the existing dwelling as a surplus dwelling from the farm. It will result in a 33-acre farm. The PPS does permit the creation of new lots in the ag area for surplus dwellings. As well, the Leamington OP also permits the creation of new lots in the ag area for this purpose, subject to meeting the listed criteria. So in particular, we know that in the end, this farm will comply with the minimum lot area of a farm. The owner has owned it for a year as of July 13th of this year. The surplus dwelling lot complies with the lot maximums and minimums for lot area and frontage. We received no comments with respect to the existing water service from CK, who provides water to that area. The applicant will be required to enter into an agreement to prohibit residential dwellings on the rest of the farm or the retained farmlands. And what is unique about this property is that we do have an operating gas well, and so we'll have to address that. So right now, the existing dwelling is about 80 meters from the gas well, and the proposed lot line will be 71 meters. Our OP says that we should protect the underground petroleum resources for the long term. We feel that the creation of this surplus dwelling will not have an impact on the ability to access those resources under the ground. We go one step further in the zoning bylaw, and we say that any new development must be 75 meters from an existing well. And based on the definitions in our ROP and the zoning bylaw, new development will include that lot line. We are allowed to consider a lesser setback than 75 feet if we consult with the ministry. We did pre-consult with both the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and the Ministry of Housing, or Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry now. They provided us with preliminary comments and then just provided us with written comments stating the same. And essentially what they're saying is we need to maintain the building restriction to ensure that no new houses or development comes closer than 75 meters to that well. We also contacted Dundee Energy, who is the operator and would have the licensing for that well. We received no comments from them. So in order to ensure that we're protecting that long-term or that resource for the long term and to make sure that that adequate setback is in place, we're recommending that our normal housekeeping amendment from A2 to A5, that it be a site-specific amendment, that it only permits the existing dwelling, so they would not be able to do any additions to the existing dwelling that may bring it closer to the 75-meter requirement. And if a new dwelling were to be constructed on site, we're suggesting that there is an increased side yard setback from the normal 1.5 meters to 4 meters, and that way we're going to ensure that the 75-meter minimum is always maintained. The resulting farm, the retained farmland, will comply with the current A2 zoning amendments or zoning, so we don't need to do any amendments there. So again, the purpose of this meeting is to receive comments. Subject to receiving any comments or questions from public or council, administration is in a position to state that the application conforms to the land division and land use policies of ROP. It is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and it satisfies the criteria to amend the zoning bylaw. Again, pending any questions, we are in a position to recommend that the provisional consent of consent application B516 be approved subject to the conditions that are listed in Schedule A, and that the requested zoning amendment be approved, and further that the amending bylaw 1516 be approved during the regular meeting of council this evening.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? I see none. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that wants to speak to council in this regard? If not, then we do have a recommendation before us. Moved by Councillor Jacobs, supported by Councillor Verbicki. Discussion on that motion? All in favor of that motion? And carried. So we have a second public meeting here, which is a consent application in regarding to 967 and 969 Highway 77. Danielle?
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Again, this is the public meeting for the purpose of receiving comments. This is our second combined consent and zoning application this evening, and it is for property located at 967 and 969 Highway 77. So Undersun Acres has purchased the residential lot at 969 Highway 77. They've also purchased the farm at 967 Highway 77. So both properties are hatched on the display on the screen. Both of these properties are located in the agricultural area of ROP. The existing residential lot is just under a half an acre in area. It contains a single detached dwelling, a detached garage, and a shed. It's currently zoned A5, and our records show that it was likely severed in 1979. The farm itself is just under 68 acres in area. It has frontage on both Mercia Road 10 and a Highway 77. It also contains a single detached dwelling as well as a barn, and we just note that the western property boundary abuts the municipal trail section. So what's unique about this property is that the owner is looking to add the residential land back to the farm, which is opposite to what we normally see. So we're treating it as a lot adjustment application. The PPS does permit lot adjustments in our ag area. As long as they're for legal or technical reasons, it's considered a minor boundary adjustment, and it's not creating any new residential lots, so we're not doing that. ROP also permits lot adjustments, provided the application satisfies the relevant provisions, including that both the severed or retained, or in this case, the resulting lands, will comply with the zoning provisions. So again, we note that we would normally do the housekeeping amendment to change the zone of the residential lot from A5 to A1 in this case. We also note that because there is a dwelling on each of those properties, we're only allowed to have one dwelling per property. The applicant has submitted a site plan sketch showing that the proposed dwelling on 969, which is the residential lot, will be removed with the construction of a greenhouse. And that has also been added as a condition to ensure that it comes down prior to the deeds being stamped. One of the second criteria is that the lands will be required to merge on title. So again, we're asking for the 1 square foot parcel to be transferred to the municipality to break the consent stamp that was given in 1979. Just as a side note, at a previous meeting, we had reported that we had allowed this. We asked that the applicant transfer 1 foot square to the municipality to break the severance. We would do the lot addition, and that they would accept the 1 foot square back. The Director of Legal and Legislative Services has done a little bit more, we've done some research, and unfortunately that will not be the case. And so for the time being, we will still take the 1 foot squares, and we're always looking for opportunities not to have to take them. So I just wanted to bring council back up to date on that. We are taking one in this case. So the proposed severance conforms to the land division policies of the PPS and the OP, and it will also allow for the development of permitted agricultural uses on the consolidated property, and it will eliminate an existing non-farm residential use in the agricultural area. So in addition to the housekeeping amendment to change the residential lot from A5 to A1, the owner has also applied for a reduction to the side yard setback for the proposed greenhouse range, and that is along the southern boundary of the farm. So greenhouse structures are required to be 49.24 feet from all property boundaries. The owner has submitted a sketch showing the setback for the greenhouse structure as well as proposed bunkhouses at 24.6 feet along the southern boundary, and that's the boundary at the bottom of the screen. In 2010, council at that time passed a resolution listing criteria of sorts that should be considered when requesting a reduced greenhouse setback, and those included the following. So the applicant must provide a reasonable explanation as to why they can't comply, or what is unique about the situation or specific to this property. The applicant has indicated in this case that they are looking for the greatest use of the site. There were also provisions to consider if a greenhouse was being constructed over 2 abutting property lines and the properties were owned by the same property owners. That's not the case here. The resolution also included a number of provisions that really cautioned reducing a greenhouse setback when there were non-farm residential uses, either on the, or not on the property, but close to the property. In this case, there are no non-farm residential uses anywhere in proximity to this farm. And finally, there was a statement that said brand new greenhouses should comply with all setbacks. So this property has identified a number of constraints to their development. The first, in addition to our required setbacks, they have setbacks from the Ministry of Transportation along Highway 77. They're also subject to municipal setbacks away from the municipal trail, and they're also subject to setbacks from the future highway corridor or hydro corridor along the municipal trail. So it is important to ensure that those setbacks are maintained. We want to ensure that there's a high level of design and aesthetics, especially along Highway 77. It's our main corridor into our urban area. And we also want to ensure that there's an appropriate setback that allows the site to function properly. In this case, the impact of the reduced setback along the interior side yard setback or side yard has less of an impact on the public realm. And that area along the southern portion would typically be used for maintenance activities and fire access to all sides of the building. Comments should be received from any abutting owners that are present this evening with respect to that side yard setback in this case. So again, the purpose of the meeting tonight is to receive any comments with respect to both the surplus dwelling as well as the reduction to the side yard setback. At this time, administration is in a position to state that the applications conform to the land division and land use policies of the OP. They're consistent with the PPS, and they satisfy the criteria to amend the zoning bylaw. Pending any questions or comments from council, administration is in a position to recommend approval of B 1116 in accordance with the conditions listed in Schedule A, also the approval of ZBA 131, and further that amending bylaw 3416 be approved during the regular meeting of council this evening.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Danielle, that's the first time I've heard you mention that line, though, with any of the greenhouse site plans that come. Important to ensure that appropriate setbacks are maintained to ensure a high level of design and aesthetics. And I'm glad you did mention that. Can you maybe expand on the aesthetics portion? Like, are they forced at that point to, let's say, put landscaping in to, go over and above, since it is on the main corridor? Are they forced to go over and above, let's say, versus going on a concession at that point? Maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So the zoning bylaw is dealing only with the setbacks. So in consideration of the reduced setback tonight, we would think, what is the impact of bringing the greenhouse closer to the road corridor? That's the question tonight. And then further to your question, right now, I'm not aware of any development standards that would request higher design. So perhaps landscaping, the planting of trees, anything along a main corridor, or even a road for that case.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Danielle, too, maybe you could explain to the new council members why the Council of 2010 wanted to put some criteria there for changing the side yard setbacks, because we did have quite a history of people applying for it, council granting it, and then we had headaches from people who decided, yes, this was, so if you don't mind expanding a little bit on that, because I don't think they'll know that history.
Sure, and I'll just go from my understanding of it, and I'll look to my director, who was here at the time as well. So there was a lesser greenhouse setback under the previous zoning bylaw, and then during the review of that comprehensive zoning bylaw, the setback was increased, and the purpose of that was to ensure that they were maintaining, again, the emergency accesses around the buildings, that there are activities that they take down their plastic, they put back up the plastic, those types of things are occurring. Sometimes we're seeing fans and generator units within those corridors, so the pushback was really to ensure that those were happening appropriate distances from property lines, also taking into consideration the number of severances for residential and small farms in the area. So that's what the increased setback was for. And then, as Deputy Mayor McDonald has noted, that as a result, we were seeing a number of minor variance applications to just reduce it back to what it was or even less. I think there were two situations there. One where you have a situation where a property, a greenhouse owner owned a number of properties and was developed them and maintained the separate ownership of the properties and wanted to develop over property lines without losing the rights to that. So they had to have variances to allow for 0 setbacks. Council has now put in a resolution or a policy that requires them to merge those properties together. So we don't see that as much anymore. But I think those policies, this resolution was really to provide direction, because there were a number of variances coming forward, just on the basis of I can get another range in.
I just had a quick question, if I could. And Councillor Wilkinson was heading down the path that I was going to go to, meaning the closer to the road corridor setbacks. The one we're talking about adjusting is a side yard, so that's, like you say, is at the bottom of the diagram. To me, if I'm talking closer to the corridor, I'm talking about 77 or Road 10. Are we lessening those corridors as well? And you did mention that the ministry has their setbacks off of 77, so what is that amount?
I can't confirm the distance at that location on the highway, so it differs depending on the nature of the corridor. We're not changing the setback along Road 10 or along Highway 77 from the municipal point. So the zoning bylaw will specifically state along the southern boundary only.
Okay, so it would still be that 49 feet off the road. Because, and again, the only reason I bring it up is because of the one operation that's on 77. I think it's on the 11th, or this side of the 11th, is to many people very close to the road. And I can't remember if we adjusted that setback there or not, but it's been a while, and I was hoping we could avoid that conversation going forward. So anyway, Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you. Danielle, a question, if I might. On the north side of the property, if you can go to the last diagram that shows the actual greenhouses themselves, it'll be on the last page. Is that a water retention pond? I mean, its diagram looks like it's a parking lot, but is that the water retention pond?
Yes, so along Road 10. Along Road 10, abutting the trail, they have a secondary access back there. So on the your left-hand side of the screen, it's hard to tell, but there's a secondary, so a minor access. Then what looks like a parking lot is their stormwater retention pond. And then along what they have along the Highway 77 are more of their service or office buildings will be located along Highway 77.
Thank you.
Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Daniel, I don't know if I'm confused with these drawings or not, but the property immediately south of what the requested setbacks are, is that owned by the same individuals? Like, are those two properties connected?
So if we went back to the aerial photograph, the farm south of it, so outside of the black line, is not owned by this person. So only the hatched area is what's subject to tonight's application. And then anything below the black line is a separate farm, and I do not believe it's owned by the same corporation, no.
Oops, sorry, you'll have to turn the microphone on first.
Hi, good evening. Since we're talking about the southern boundary, I'm also a solicitor for the owner of the southern boundary. It's owned by 2250286 Ontario Limited, and we want to place on a record that they support our application tonight.
Okay, does that address your concern, Councillor?
Not entirely, because what I was looking at is because the required setbacks we're looking for, as you mentioned earlier, we've done these before where they've came up close, and that's why we had to amend this because of the possible noise generators and so forth. So, like, even though the current owner is not objecting to this, if he sells or whatever takes place in those particular areas, we're going to wind up in the same boat we were before with supposedly the nuisance of the adjoining properties, like with noise. And, you know, they set up the boiler rooms, I think was the last one that we had an issue with. So how do we protect that southern boundary, I guess, is what we're looking at.
If I can really quickly, Danielle, the boiler issue was because it was established so close to a residential unit right next door, and there, I don't know where the boilers are going here, but there's no residential around it that.
Currently, there's not, but I'm saying if they sell that property and someone wants to do something, and then we're looking at, you know, we've got these
It's existing
setbacks,
use, right?
Well,
So,
I guess, but
yeah,
looking down the road, I guess.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, so. Sir?
I was going to say one thing, that we do have agreement with the two owners, and it's binding on successive owners that they will support each other's developments of similar nature.
Okay. No other questions? Then, being a public meeting, I'll open the floor. Anyone in the audience that's here to address council in this regard, please come forward.
I have one more question for Danielle. On the 1 foot square, I was under understanding that we were going to transfer it to ourselves to break the severance because you don't want to have little squares and liability across the municipality.
Yes, so our original discussions, the square was going to be located in the southwest corner of the residential lot so that we could transfer it back and forth between each other to break that severance. If you look at your reference plan, it was actually located at the northeast corner of that plan. So it was prepared not in that, not based on our discussions, but it actually works out better because we came up with that information after our preliminary consultation a number of months ago. So it'll have to be maintained by the municipality.
I don't understand why. Why can't we transfer it to ourselves anyways?
Up to our solicitor.
Through further investigation, upon a reconveyance of the 1 foot square, it would reestablish the former consent. And that is what the municipality wishes to avoid. A former consent, which we are in the process of breaking through your application, we would not want reestablished.
But we could transfer it into the holding company and then transfer the whole piece except for that, and at the end transfer it back, and that would never be the whole individual lot again.
No.
Okay.
So, something to be dealt with as we go forward, I guess. Besides, that's going to be a nice spot for us in town to be able to come out there and stand with both our feet on that 1 foot square, and we can see what's going on without being charged with trespassing, right?
Okay.
Joking. I think, actually, what I took from the conversation tonight was they're going to try and find ways to deal with it. Am I wrong? That's what I gathered from
Through
Danielle.
investigation, we would like to. However, we have not been able to establish another method that would be as effective as this method is.
Okay. So for now, it's just a pain.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? And nobody from the audience is here to discuss this? Councillor Berbiki moves, supported by Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on that? All in favor? And carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's it for the public meetings. So back to our reports of staff and delegations. The first report this evening is one regarding 203 Talbot Street West and site plan control approval. And Tracy?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Tonight's recommendation is that the site plan for the proposed office building located at 203 Talbot Street West be approved and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the site plan control agreement subject to the Conservation Authority approval, County of Essex approval, Ministry of the Environment clearance or approval for stormwater, and a revised site plan to be inserted into the final site plan control agreement. Just to give you a little bit of background, administration received an application for site plan control approval by the subject, by the owner of the subject property. Additional information has been sent in that the new owner now will be JD Investments, so we will reflect that transfer in the new site plan control agreement. The comments for this proposal is that it's proposed to construct a single-story office building which will house the new location for Collins Barrow, which is an accounting firm. The site is going to be part of the entire Leamington Medical Village, as access will be from that main entrance in addition to Talbot Street West, also known as County Road 34. A single-family dwelling was demolished as part of this development. There are required parking spaces, 42 standard spaces and 2 barrier-free spaces provided, and the driveway will be hard surface. There was a consent application for this particular property, and the Committee of Adjustment did sever the new commercial lot, and the deeds have been stamped. And that is all that I had prepared to present. I do note that Cindy Prince is here, the developer. If you have any additional questions or concerns, either Cindy and I can answer those questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question on this. The access to this is as part of the medical village there, correct? The property is all encompassed in the same, I guess, footprint. I'm just wondering, will the access and that be off the current driveway servicing the medical center?
They'll have 2 accesses. One will be through the main entrance that currently goes into the medical village, and then you would go around the existing Arby's and then down, or there's also access directly from Talbot Street.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is because I know that's getting to be a pretty busy thoroughfare there with the medical center itself and hospice back there, and I just was wondering if it's going to be able to handle all that traffic with the current line.
If I could add that engineering services has reviewed a traffic study impact as part of this proposal, and that the volumes did not require any additional controls in that particular T intersection.
And then I had Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Worship. I had the same question as Councillor Jacobs pretty much. We touched on this back in Committee of Adjustment. If I remember right, Cindy, we had talked that we anticipated there would be a traffic light going up there. I work on this end of town. I've seen how the Talbot West has been built up in the last 10 years. It's incredible, you know, the amount of healthcare we got going on down there. Fast food, and now we're putting in another additional office building. That section right there, trying to get out off of Armstrong, I think it is, trying to make a left or a left out of the medical center, is a tough task to do right now. And to go and put more traffic in here, which is great. I was looking for, yes, what our engineers' opinions were on the traffic. I thought for sure there'd be a light coming here. I'm surprised there isn't.
Ms. Prince?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We were, quite frankly, pleasantly surprised by the results of the traffic study as well. They did indicate to us, however, that the next building will warrant signalization. So because this one has the entrance, its own dedicated entrance off of Talbot, as well as just using the main entrance as a secondary access, the conclusion of the traffic impact study was that they're still well within the warrants for not requiring signalization, but the next building, depending on the nature of that building, most likely will require it.
Okay. No other questions or concerns? There is a recommendation before us. Council's wishes? Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Oh, sorry. Wait, I've got a mover. The Deputy Mayor is moving, supported by Councillor Wilkinson. Further comment? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to ask council for one consideration with respect to the recommendation, and I apologize for the late request. We've had a lot of discussions the last week with municipal staff and with the Ministry of the Environment. The way the recommendation's worded, it says that you be authorized to execute the agreement subject to the approval of the following pending items by the municipality and/or applicable approval authority. If we could leave that following approval by the municipality, if we have to wait to get approval from the Ministry of the Environment, it will delay the construction of this significantly. The ministry has agreed with us that its approval is not required. We've met with Mr. Pilmer. He agrees. The hospice building, it wasn't required. But if we have to wait to get something in writing from the ministry, we go in this queue, and it's going to take us 10 to 12 weeks to get that. And that'll put our project seriously offside. So we're just wondering if we could just leave it that it be subject to the approval of your administration, and then we can loop them in with the ministry verbally.
Well, I would ask both my solicitor and my planner for their opinion on that request. So Tracy, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? And
The ministry approval is considered applicable law, so prior to the issuance of the building permit, that's where the trigger is to be able to get ministry clearance or a permit. At this time, we weren't too sure what the ministry was going to issue. Even just some sort of a letter of acknowledgement would be good to have in our hands that this chief building official can issue his building permit. If not, I think we'd have to look at our legal department for some other ways that we could issue a footing and foundation to start, conditional building permit, and possibly the ministry approval later. I'm not too sure what other tools are in our toolbox on that.
Ruth?
If the Ministry of Environment approval for stormwater management system is applicable law, and I would have to do the research on it, so I'll take the advice of the director on that. Then there's no bar to entering into the site plan agreement, but as the director has indicated, the only delay at that point then would be the building permit, and that would be under the approval of the chief building official. So on that basis, that there's no reason to have that provision within the recommendation.
So it would be okay if we removed that?
Yeah.
Council, understand what's being asked for on this? Councillor Verbicki?
Where the mayor is just going to come to haunt us if there is all of a sudden an issue. It's on a nice hill. And we know they had problems down with the hospice with water, so I just don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse that we may be in trouble after the fact.
Against Ruth?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor, so I would entertain a friendly amendment to that motion then, moved by the deputy mayor to alter as requested. And who supported? I can't remember. Councillor Verbicki? All right. Further discussion? All in favor of that motion? And carried.
Thanks very much.
Next report is one regarding the outfitting of dump truck cab and chassis, and I think Ken is taking us through this.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of council. This report is on the results of tenders received for the outfitting of a new dump truck cab and chassis. The outfitting would include a dump body, slide-in salter, and front and wing plows for winter control. Only one tender was received from Viking with a bid a little over $122,000. Administration had budgeted $200,000 for this purchase of both the cab and chassis and the outfitting. Unfortunately, the combined actual cost, as shown in the report, will be around $226,000. We feel that the weaker Canadian dollar and resulting supplier increases are likely the cause. The outfitting of this truck will be similar to our existing tandems, except for the salter. And these trucks primarily run in the rural area during the winter, so those are the bigger rural snow plows. The specification asks for a slide-in salter, which is an improved design from the traditional tailgate salter. And although it is more expensive, administration felt that with the added benefits from both a health and safety perspective, as well as overall efficiency, it was a better choice. So with that, the recommendation is that the purchase of the outfitting attachments from Viking be approved for purchase and charged to the Public Works capital account, and that council approve an overextender to a maximum of $26,000 for the purchase to be funded from the Fleet and Equipment Reserve account. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Worship. I'm glad to see this, Ken, and I think, at least I would hope that this slide-in salter will work on our next purchase, our new dump truck, so they'll be compatible, just sliding these into the existing boxes. Is that correct?
Yes, as long as it's the same cab and chassis, which for our rural plows, we have 3. 2 of them are set up that they would fit this slide-in salter style.
And I wholeheartedly agree with your comment. I think it's a lot safer and more feasible to be using this type of equipment. You're not lifting the boxes in the air and doing all that kind of good stuff. So good job, Ken. Thank you.
And moved by Councillor Jacobs, support by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on the motion. Anyone? Everybody's clear? Okay. All in favor of that motion? And carried. Next item is a report regarding sewer maintenance budget. And Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council's approval for an over-expenditure to the annual sewer maintenance budget. And just for information, council may recall that Leamington does provide sewer collection service to our urban area through sanitary, storm, and combination sewers. And the combination sewers, they collect and convey storm and sanitary water to our pollution control center. And this was the typical sewer that was constructed prior to, say, around 1970. And some of our sewers were installed as early as 1910, 1900, so these sewers are 40 to 100 years old. And in almost every instance, it seems that the combination sewers and the connections are located under the roadway, which leads to expensive repairs. And the repairs do have, because of the age of the system and the service we're providing, we move quickly to repair these services and keep the service going. So our annual expenditure for this item for sewer connections is approximately $50,000 to manage these repairs to sanitary and combined sewer connections. We've already experienced a number of repairs in 2016, and council may recall that we've started a water main project on Georgia and Morgan Avenue. The contractor will be using a directional drilling operation to install the sewers. So prior to starting that operation, we asked that they camera the sewer system and identify the location of all the sewers. When they were doing the camera work, they identified that a number of the connections are infested with roots or breaking, and we should repair those during the construction operation while they're there and there's a contractor on site. We identified 9 of these connections that may have problems. And we are recommending that we proceed with the repairs as we find them, and that we get the contractor, Nevin Construction, that's already been awarded the construction project to make those repairs. We anticipate that the cost could be approximately $35,000, and therefore we're asking that council approve an over expenditure to the sewer maintenance budget, and that the over expenditure be funded from the infrastructure reserve account.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Alan, the connections that, with these 9 private properties and so forth, they will be done at our cost, or will they, some of that be billed to the homeowner? Like, is this considered an upgrade or whatever?
The repairs that we'll be making that I've discussed today will all be in the right-of-way from the property line to the sewer main, so they're all the repairs will be in the right-of-way under the road, and they would have been our responsibility anyway. We won't be making repairs on the private side from the property line to the house.
In the event that some of the, I guess this root infestation as well goes beyond our specific area, then it'll become the responsibility of the homeowner to tap in at the same time, or like, I guess what I'm looking at is how we're going to prevent maybe, we do it and then all of a sudden there's a backup caused by their particular end of the line. Like, do we protect ourselves in any way to notify them at that particular point in time?
Certainly, we'll be taking notes and inspecting the sewer work, and the inspector on site will be talking with the homeowners if they find anything. We'll have a record of it, and we'll make sure that the homeowners have a record of it, and we'll make suggestion that they go ahead and make repairs, because it could result in some damage in the near future.
And that's where I was going with it, I guess, that while everything is on site, maybe the homeowners can work in with the construction company if that's the case and get it all done at one time. So thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
Councillor Berbiki?
Worthy Mayor, thanks. Approximately 35,000? Could be 25, could be 55, or is it just?
We feel that there's about 9 connections, and we estimate it on the high side for the repair work, so I don't believe it's going to exceed 35,000.
Any other, moved by Councillor Jacobs, support by Councillor Hammond. Further discussion on that motion? All in favor? And carried. Thank you, Alan. Next report is one regarding site plan control approval, proposed Union Gas Station, Essex Road 18. Tracy?
Thank you again, Mayor and members of council. The recommendation is for a site plan for a Union Gas Station site located at 601 Essex Road 18, that it be approved and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the site plan control agreement. Just as some comments, the purpose of the Union Gas Station is for the hydrocarbon transmission line. There's a figure in the report that shows the site plan and a detailed site plan of what the area will look like. Overall, the site will have access through some various easements along some of the abutting lands to the south. The site will be fenced by chain link fence with 2 proposed storage buildings. One building will be about 1,300 square meters in size, and the other one will be about 4,000 square meters in size. Both will require a building permit. Administration has completed its review of the proposed site plan, and the proposed development does comply with all the objectives of the Planning Act and the municipal policies. And it's recommended that the application be approved.
Questions, comments? Councillor Berbiki?
Worthy Mayor, thanks. Tracy, now, is it part, the entrance going to be right next to our trail, or is it going to take the proposed new driveway coming in there, part 4, part 5?
The primary access will be part 5, but they will have a secondary access which will be along our trail. It'll have some distinct separations. Our trail will be finished with a different surface. And I'm not too sure why the purpose of having 2, but the majority is they're going to use that industrial access because it'll actually be paved and it's already there.
Thanks, because, I mean, there's already one there for Dundee next to our trail to the back, so I wasn't sure why it was listed here that they're going to be you know, I guess it's just going to be, hopefully not more traffic down our road.
Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. The only concern I has is, excuse me, that none of this does affect us for our power line coming in, correct?
No.
There's no issues that will arrive in the future with all this stuff going on?
We recently had a meeting with Union Gas and with Hydro One, and they are working part and parcel on that hydro line and the gas line. So,
It would be great if they both came in at the same day.
yeah, that's not going to happen. It's going to take to 2018 before the hydro line's up and running. So we'll be hearing about it shortly, I'm sure. Moved by Councillor Verbicki, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Carried. And then the final report is one regarding an application for site plan control, parking lot expansion on 96 Elliott. Tracy?
Thank you. So this is a parking lot expansion for an existing church, the Leamington Christian Center. We're requesting that the site plan be approved and the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute that site plan agreement. And there is still one outstanding condition on this one as well, and that's the approval from the Conservation Authority. But we do understand it's on its way. Just to give you a little background, we did have an application for site plan control previously for the addition and the renovation, but it didn't require a full entering into a new agreement as it was exempt because of the square footage. So the area for the parking lot does require site plan control, so we will have an opportunity to enter into a new agreement. It's proposed to construct 18 new parking spaces to the west of the subject property. There are 30 existing parking spaces and 2 barrier-free. The subject will now have a total of 50. The minor variance was also approved by the Committee of Adjustment to allow for a parking expansion by reducing the required minimum landscape open space requirements from 40 to 23.3%. The proposed parking will be hard surface, and there'll be some additional buffering around the property. And administration has had an opportunity to review, and we are in support of this proposed application.
Questions? Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you. It's nice, Tracy, that administration has been able to work this out, both through Committee of Adjustment and through yourself. So I'll move the acceptance of the report.
Okay, mover and supported by the Deputy Mayor. My only quick question on it is residential right beside and in front of that extended parking lot. Is there any issue there at all, Tracy, that need to be worried about?
It was something that was discussed at Committee of Adjustment and discussed at the Development Review Committee. There's a buffering that's on the west side, and then on the north side there's some green space as well. And then we made sure that the parking was set back from the immediate residential so that it would decrease the amount of headlights that would go in. This isn't a normal activity that is in the evenings or early mornings. It's usually daytime, so we felt that that necessary setback was enough to create that buffer.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions, then all in favor of that recommendation and carried. We'll move on. There were no matters for approval or other matters for consideration. No report on closed session this evening, but we do have consideration of bylaws.
There are 3 bylaws this evening for reading. Bylaw 15-16 being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw number 89009 for the municipality of Leamington, which pertains to the subject land zoning bylaw amendment number 128-2428 Mercy Road 7. Bylaw 3416 being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 89009 for the municipality of Leamington pertaining to the subject land zoning bylaw amendment 131, 967 and 969 Highway 77, and bylaw 36-16 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Leamington at its meeting held June 13th, 2016, all to be read a first, second, and third and final time.
Moved by Councillor Verbicki, supported by Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. There were no notices of motion circulated, so we're into open session for council and administration. Nothing. Well, I got to say it. Again, welcome, Gary. And I assume this is your wife that is here with you? And Well, I congratulate both of you for sitting through an entire council meeting. I hope you don't have to do it ever again, but if you do, at least you'll know what to expect. So, are there any statements of members non-debatable? I see none. Then I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Verbicki, all in favor? And carried.